Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. I'm just going to mention right off the bat that the sound quality might not be the best in this video. You see, ideally I wouldn't be talking about the events of this video right after they happened, but because of time management strategizing, I knew that I didn't have enough time to talk about it right after it happened. I only had enough time to just show off the yarn. So I decided the next best thing would be right before I fell asleep. But it is currently the hotel's quiet hours, and I don't really want to be too loud, especially since I know there are people on the other side of that wall. So please bear with me here. I will do my best to make sure I'm speaking clearly. When I was checking out at Cece's Wool, Yarn and More, Cece saw that I bought a lot of roving and some drop spindles, and so she's like, well, you're among friends with spinners here, and she's asking like, do you have a spinning wheel? And I was like, no, I mean, I've tried a spinning wheel once in Ireland, but I just have a drop spindle. And she's like, that's a lot to use with only a drop spindle. She offered like, I don't know like your schedule if you have to rush off to another store or whatnot, but we can go next door and I can show you how to use a spinning wheel, and you can use a spinning wheel for yourself. And so just for reference, today is Saturday. I knew that there was only one store left that could not be done on a Sunday. And tomorrow was like my last day planned for the yarn trail. So, and I knew I had enough time because when she offered me this, it was like sometime between 1 to 2 o'clock, and the other store didn't close till 5. So I knew I had enough time to just relax and let be. So I was like, yeah, this is too good an opportunity to pass up. So after I got my yarn, she's like, well, drop off your stuff in your car and meet me in that store over there. So it turns out Cece has a separate weaving studio in the same parking complex. So I dropped off all my purchases in the car, and then I also took out this roving from the roving that I just bought, which I know I'm learning a new skill, so I didn't necessarily want to pick out the best roving that I had. That way I would be less upset if there were mistakes in it. And we got started. So I was able to walk right into the weaving studio. There were a bunch of people already weaving, and someone had just returned a spinning wheel. It turns out that Cece also rents spinning wheels. So I was using the spinning wheel that was just returned from having been rented. It was a Louette spinning wheel, and it was different from other spinning wheels that I've seen. So it had like a circular thing on the bottom, like it had the circle on the bottom, the spinning part, and then it had the bobbin on top, and it was foot pedal operated. My right foot was operating the pedal to make the spinning wheel spin. And then with the bobbin part was interchangeable. It could move in and out, but then it wove through these two like circulars, kind of like a scope that you would see on like a gun or a telescope, and then it went through another part right there, which is right where he held the fiber. Before I was able to sit down at the spinning wheel, Cece told me that I had to take my shoes off so that way my foot could actually feel the spinning wheel, which was good. I was wearing these, so you can imagine I don't really feel the ground when I'm wearing these. It's like a whole inch of like just rubber. I only needed to take off the one on my right foot. It was a bit of a learning thing. So at first Cece explained the entire process, and then she had me sit down and try it for myself, and she was pretty much just like near me the entire time, so that way she could step in if she could see I was needing help. And probably the hardest part was making sure the wheel was spinning in the right direction. When you're using a spinning wheel, when you're applying the roving into yarn, you want to make sure the wheel goes clockwise. And then when you've got the first ply and you decide to put multiple plies together, the wheel then spins counterclockwise. That counteracts the spin that's already going on in the yarn, and it makes the yarn more balanced, as they say. Like, it's difficult. So probably the closest thing that I would say about learning how to use a spinning wheel is that it's very much like learning how to drive a stick shift. Because you've got 4 limbs and you're using 3 of them. I'd never driven a stick shift, so this was definitely a little bit more difficult, yeah? So this is the roving right here. So you pre-draft the roving a bit. So as the yarn is twisting, like this. My left hand is supposed to pinch it right here and hold it tight. And then my right hand is supposed to pull the roving down, so it's more like this. The twist is happening above my hand. My hand is kind of like just pulling down and letting the twist happen. For me, when I was first, like towards the beginning of learning how to do this, the twist was also happening down here, and which often happens a lot when I use a spindle, like a drop spindle. Turns out, like, as you pull it down every so often, you wind the yarn back onto the bobbin by just moving your hand forward. That winds it back into the bobbin and prevents that part of the yarn from getting more twists. All while that's happening, my foot is operating the pedal. And it's all about finding the tempo too. Like, you don't want to go too fast, because obviously I'm learning, I want to make sure I don't like break something. But if I go too slow, I lose the momentum and the wheel starts turning in the opposite direction. And if it starts turning the opposite direction, it starts undoing the work that I just did. When we were just getting started with the wheel, there were several times like Cece reached out and started making sure the wheel was spinning in the right direction. That was probably the hardest part, was making sure the wheel was spinning in the right direction. I started with my merino, but then Cece was like, no, the merino is not the best yarn to spin with when you're learning how to spin, because it's not a very grabby yarn. It's very smooth, which a lot of wool tends to be more grabby. You want to make sure the fibers all go together. So Cece actually went and got some roving. So she got this green roving right here. And I mean, this is merino wool, a merino wool blend. This is more like Romney or Corriedale. So there's a little bit more grabby to the fibers, and it was a little bit easier to work with this off the bat. Also, another thing that I learned about spinning today is that when you start working on the spinning wheel, you're supposed to have a leader thread. I remember seeing leader threads when I was at the Good Karma yarn shop with the spinning machine. It was also there for the hand spinning wheel, and like Cece happened to mention, like, yeah, you're also supposed to do the same thing when you use a drop spindle. And it's like, oh, I did not know that. I have not been doing that. And she's like, how have you been spinning it? And it's like, I've kind of just been folding it and just starting to spin right at the thing. I had some practice spinning. It's hard to keep track of how much time I was there. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure how long I was there. I want to say I was spinning anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour. At first she had me work on it for a little bit longer, and then she had me stop and we changed the bobbin. So the bobbin is kind of like a toilet paper roll in a way. You had the one part that you insert there, and then there's another part that kind of had it, like right where the hole was where we were feeding the yarn, there was a little strap over that. So if we lifted that strap out, we could lift out the bobbin segment, and we loaded up another clean bobbin, and I started spinning on that one as well. So we got approximately the same amount of yarn. After that, there were like 3 bobbins down below. So we changed the bobbin for the last time, and then we started to apply the yarn. There was like a little metal stick that was like right there, like right towards the bottom, right next to the petals on the left side. And the 2 bobbins were on there, and there's like a lot of just pulling up the yarn and putting the twist in it. Unlike the roving, where you had to make sure the twist was there, and if you didn't put the twist there, it was going to fall apart. The yarn was already twisted and was not going to fall apart. So at this point, putting the twist in it was a lot quicker. It was a lot easier to keep my pace. And then I found out that I had not the same amount of yarn on both bobbins. The first bobbin had slightly more yarn on it, simply because towards the end of spinning the second bobbin, I just ended up stopping and listening to the story of one of the other ladies in the store who ended up delivering an alpaca. Like, she had an alpaca that was pregnant and she had to help deliver the baby, and it was a mess. Like, some of the merino yarn actually ended up in it, and you can actually see the merino and the Romney are together here, and the colors look pretty nicely together. So this was a skein, and Although this is actually spun over again. Cece wound it up for me before it happened, but you can see the yarn is kind of twisting on me. Just a tad bit. But this is the yarn that I spun. And I mean, there's some variety in the yarn. Like you can tell, there's some parts where it got a little bit overly twisty. But definitely by the second skein, like look at that. That is amazing. Look at that. This was the very end. Like Cece ended up taking the yarn from the bobbin, the last bobbin, and she put it on her Swift. And then she just wrapped it around the Swift. And then she found the ends of the yarn because she's like, it's your yarn, you should know where the ends are. And then she used it to tie a knot, and then she took some more scrap yarn and put it around the different parts, that way the skein doesn't get tangled. I know from experience with other skeins that when that doesn't happen, it gets messy. Obviously this yarn is not balanced because I'm still learning. I was over twisting it. Turns out I'm supposed to wash the yarn before I use it. So Cece told me warm water with some Dawn soap, and the Dawn soap will help take some of the twist out, so that way it's a little bit more balanced. But even if it's still twisty after that, I could just hang the top of it and then just take a can of peas or a can of corn, and just have the can rest on the bottom part and have it stretch out that way, and make gravity do the work for me. By the time the yarn is spun like that, it should be strong enough to hold a can. After I did some spinning there, there was about 4 to 5 other ladies there, and they were all weaving on heddle looms. It was not just weave back and forth, back and forth. One was putting a trim on some wall hangings that she had, but the other ones had the looms with the foot pedals underneath and the little heddles holding the warp of the looms. And a couple let me take some footage of what they were working on. It was impressive. The one lady was working on a loom. It was there were at least, I want to say there were 10 pedals. You almost need to be an octopus to operate that. I am absolutely grateful to Cece for offering to show me and for letting me use her spinning wheel. And I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to try it. I now have a better sense of how the spinning wheel works. Especially after today, I had a couple different brands recommended to me, so now I can actually start looking for a good deal on a spinning wheel and see how it goes. It may have sounded strange that this was a separate store from the yarn store, but Cece says that it's not going to be like that for much longer because she's actually in the process of expanding her store, so that way she can bring the weaving looms inside her store, so that way the yarn and the looms are in the same place. The reason why they were in 2 different stores to begin with was because of the pandemic. Lots of people did pick up more handicrafts during the pandemic. Once it started being more safer to get back together in person, people still wanted more of the social distancing, and the inside of Cece's yarn store, as it currently is jam-packed full of yarn and would not have been able to provide that type of spacing. After they expand, they should have more of that spacing, but people still wanted to weave together but wanted social space, and the weaving studio a couple stores down did provide that space for them. It's actually a pretty interesting setup because it did strike me as strange that they were not in the same part of the building. As always, when I'm visiting these different stores, I'm going to be leaving all the information down below, so if you want to go visit for yourself or you want to buy yarn from Cece, you absolutely can. She would love your business. Anyway, that was today's entertainment. Have a nice day.